Hey everybody, Keep7 here, back with another Kaldheim spoiler video. We have a big video here today. Lots of cards to spoil, obviously. We're a couple days in as spoiler season has started, so a lot of cards are coming out and being released and being spoiled. So I'm going to try not to talk so much about each individual card and just try to, show you each card so that you can see it, maybe say a sentence or two, and move on to the next one, so, we're not sitting here for hours and hours. I'm also going to put a link in the description to mythicspoiler.com, which is where a collection of pretty much all the spoiled cards are, so you can go out and see them, because I'm not covering all of them. There's going to be a lot that I'm covering today. These are ones that I think are notable for one reason or another, or maybe good, or maybe bad, maybe laughable. But more or less, I'm just trying to go through as many cards here as possible, ones that are notable and ones that, I think are worth bringing to your attention for one reason or another. And without rambling on and on any further, let's just get right into it. A handful. So the first is Thorolf, God of Fury, 4 mana, 2 and 2 red, legendary god. He's a 5/4 with trample. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Thorolf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. So this is kind of like, I think he's supposed to be like Thor. He's a dual-faced card. I think a lot of the gods are. And the other side of him is an equipment, Thorolf's Hammer, 2 mana, 1 and a red. Equipped creature has an ability for 2 mana, 1 and a red. Tap it, unattach Thorolf's Hammer. It deals 3 damage to any target. Return the hammer to its owner's hand. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary. And has an equip cost of 1 and a red. They're really trying to push equipment and equipping stuff with Nahiri and all that, and I feel like they've been trying to push it for a while, and I don't think it's quite there yet, and I don't think Thorolf is what's going to bring it there. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Next is Asika, God of the Tree, 3 mana, 1 and 2 green, legendary god with vigilance. Tap her to add 1 mana of any color. Other legendary creatures you control have vigilance and tap to add 1 mana of any color. She is also a dual-face card. The other side of the card is 1 color of every mana, so 5 mana, white, blue, black, red, green. Legendary enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in any random order. Complicated casting costs are difficult in a competitive setting, so I don't know that this card sees much play. And yeah, short and sweet. Next is Starnheim Unleashed. It's a 4 mana, 2 and 2 white sorcery. Create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. If the spell was foretold, create X of those tokens instead, and its foretell cost is X, X, and a white. So you pay 2 colorless mana during your turn at some point, exile the card face down, and then you can cast it for its foretell cost later. So that's actually pretty cheap. I mean, it's 3 mana to make. It's 3 mana to make 2. Oh no, it'd be 3 mana to make 1 4/4. It'd be 5 mana to make 2 4/4s with flying and vigilance. So the foretell cost isn't bad. This is reminiscent of. It's cheaper than Amiria's Call, but nobody's playing Amiria's Call for the spell. Everybody's playing Amiria's Call because it's a land when you need it. And then it's an okay spell later in the game, and it's a. And I say okay, I mean it's a good spell. Creating 2 4/4 angel creature tokens isn't bad. But for its casting cost, what is it, 7? It's 4 and 3 white. So this is cheaper than that. So maybe it's kind of playable, but if you're playing angels anyway, if this is your big end game, what are you making, like a bunch of 4/4 angels that can get, extinction evented or something like that? So it's an interesting card. It's value-wise, it's better than the Amiria's Call spell side, but Amiria's Call is just better because it's a land when you need it. And, nothing is worse than getting mana fucked. So interesting card. Could see play, but I think Amiria's Call is just better because it's a land on one side. Next is Burning Rune Demon. 6 mana, 4 and 2 black, flying 6/6. So a 6 mana 6/6 with flying. Ooh. Demon Berserker creature. When Burning Rune Demon enters the battlefield, you may search your library for exactly 2 cards not named Burning Rune Demon that have different names. If you do, reveal those cards. An opponent chooses one of them. Put the chosen card into your hand and the other into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. It gets a card into your hand, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But for 6 mana to just get 1 card in your hand and 1 card in your graveyard, I mean, I guess with some decks with graveyard synergies, that's good. Allowing your opponent to choose between the 2 cards isn't. But, you know, if they're all good cards, you're making their life difficult anyway, so... The one thing is, it's not like it's not like look at the top blank cards of your library for 2 cards. You literally just search your library for 2 cards that have different names, and then you make your opponent choose between them. So that's actually pretty good. So you can intentionally make your opponent's life difficult, making them choose between two cards they don't want you to have. Putting it into your hand is obviously rough, because it can get, there are hand disruption spells and things like that, and obviously you would just want stuff to get onto the battlefield as quickly as possible. But if this brought something out onto the battlefield, that would be pretty rough. And then, I mean, if you think about this in context with maybe like a Kroxa, you can get a Kroxa into your hand, or you can make them put it into your graveyard so you can get it back faster if you have, like, again, self-mill strategies and stuff like that to get it out faster. But by turn 6, you really should have had a Kroxa out anyway. Like most of the Rakdos mid-range decks try to get him out on turn 4 by self-milling with Mire Triton. So it's an interesting card. I just don't know that it's competitive, but a 6 mana 6/6 with flying is pretty good. Next is Cosmo Serpent. It's a 4 mana 3 and a blue horse spirit creature with flash and flying, and it's a 3/3. So that's already pretty good. Foretelling cards from your hand costs 1 less and can be done on any player's turn. That's fantastic. And it has a foretell cost itself of 3 mana 2 and a blue. If there is a foretell deck out there, if just like Mutate had its own kind of deck, and Adventures had a definitive like teamer version of itself that was very powerful. If Foretell has a version of itself that's a deck, it's all focused around Foretell. This is a mainstay in that deck. Other than that, I don't know if it's these particularly play anywhere else, but we'll leave it at that. Next, we are looking at Quakebringer. It's a 5 mana 3 and 2 red giant berserker creature. It's a 5/4. Your opponents can't gain life. At the beginning of your upkeep, Quakebringer deals 2 damage to each opponent. This ability triggers only if Quakebringer is on the battlefield or if it's in your graveyard and you control a giant. And it has a foretell cost of 4 mana, 2 and 2 red. It's a mythic. I've been shitting on giants a lot. And then I went out and I made a Mardu Giants deck that I absolutely loved playing, and it was pretty powerful, and it won a decent amount of games. So I think Giants might actually be a deck. With like Invasion of the Giants, that saga that we covered in a recent video. Now with like Quakebringer, this is a really good card. I really like this card a lot. With this, with Bone Crusher Giant, Kroxa, I mean, there is a deck there, and it's good. I think so. Giant Tribal could be a thing, and I think this is absolutely an inclusion. If not like a 2 of, maybe even a 4 of. I like it a lot. Opponents can't gain life is fantastic. I mean, that's almost just a throw-in. Its foretell cost is almost just a throw-in. That middle chunk of text of dealing 2 damage, and you just have to control a giant or have it on the battlefield, is pretty good. So I like it a lot, and it has changed my mind on Giants. I think Giants could be very playable. Next is a very interesting card. Egon, God of Death. 3 mana, 2 and a black, 6/6. So a 3 mana 6/6 with Death Touch. Death Touch almost redundant for a 6/6, but at the same time, I mean, you can't discount that. You can attack with it, I guess. Like, you can attack with it, and it has Death Touch. You kill anything that it hits. Doesn't have trample, but, still. Irregardless, a 6/6 with Death Touch for 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile 2 cards from your graveyard. If you can't, sacrifice Egon and draw a card. And then on the other side of him, is an artifact. He's a dual-faced card. I think most of the gods are dual-faced. So on the other side is Throne of Death. It's a 1-mana legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. And then for 3 mana, 2, a black, you can tap it, exile a creature card from your graveyard, and draw a card. So interesting. Like with if you have like a self-mill strategy and you get him out early, like think about him and like if you can get him onto the battlefield and you can exile cards from your graveyard to keep him on the battlefield, and you can like demonic embrace him, like turn 3, play him, exile 2 cards, he sits on the battlefield, he can defend because he's a 6/6. If he doesn't get removed, and then you put like a demonic embrace on him the next turn, you swing for 9 on turn 4. And assuming like there isn't really a black aggro deck out there right now, but maybe, you know, maybe with some of the cards that are getting released in this set, maybe we haven't seen a lot of low casting cost creatures. I mean, there's Valky, which is a low black casting cost. So he's a 2/1, but we haven't seen much. But who knows? Maybe there could be a mono black deck out there. Like if self mill is, well, I guess self mill doesn't really affect Thieves Guild Enforcer, does it? Thieves Guild Enforcer affects your opponent's graveyard. I was thinking you could do self mill and buff your own Thieves Guild Enforcer, but that's not how it works. Anyway. Very interesting card. I don't know if it's good. I really don't. You might think that a 3-mana 6/6 is, but it's very conditional, which is difficult. Makes it difficult to play. I'd love to see it be very good. I'd love to see like a very cool mono black aggro deck out there, and I think it and Demonic Embrace would be the fucking nuts. Anyway. Next card, Tibolt Trickery. 2 mana, 1 and a red, instant, counter target spell. That's right, a red counter spell. Choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in any random order. So red gets a counter spell. How exciting. I'm seeing a lot of people say that this is bad. This is a bad card. And if you're targeting your opponent, it very well could be. You could really shoot yourself in the foot by casting this. You know, red decks that maybe want to counter a board wipe or something could really like this. But you could give your opponent a dream trawler. They could get a dream trawler. You know that you get rid of the board wipe, but then you put an impossibly large wall in front of you that is going to be difficult to tear down. My thought is you cast this on yourself. The first thought I had is Kroxa. I don't know why he's been bouncing around my head so much lately, but like you counter your own Kroxa that's not escaping. You put it into your obviously you're countering it, so you're putting it into your own graveyard where you want it to be. You get to feed it 1, 2, or 3 cards at random. Which also it says choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. If I'm countering my own Kroxa, I'm doing 3 to feed it more cards so it can exile faster. But I'm assuming it just will do the card number for you, right? Like if it's at random, I'm assuming you can't choose 3 at random because if you're choosing 3, okay, that's a philosophical debate. Anyway, but you mill cards, you feed your Uro, then you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with a different name than the spell, other than Kroxa, and you can cast that card without paying its mana cost. So you get a free card. Whether it's a Mire Triton or maybe it's like a Scourge of the Skyclaves or, you know, something else. You know, countering your own Kroxa hurts because you don't get the discard and you don't get to damage them for 3, but you get to feed it, potentially get it out faster, and you get a free card out of it. So that was, I feel like you're making yourself the target of this spell is almost what you want to be doing. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like people are thinking about it as far as like countering, countering board wipes and stuff if you're playing red, and I don't think that's it. I think there's like a more janky way to play this card that makes it more effective. I don't think it's good. Like irregardless, I don't think it's good, but I think that people are thinking about it in the wrong way. People are thinking about it as complete trash, and I just think it's bad. But potentially good. I think it could be like a Transmogrify, is I guess what I'm saying. And Transmogrify doesn't see a lot of play, and it's difficult to play those kinds of decks. So, all right, next, Rally the Ranks. 2 mana, 1 and a white enchantment. As Rally the Ranks enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. It's a cheap enchantment. It's easier to cast than Glorious Anthem or whatever that card is. Glorious Anthem obviously pumps every creature regardless of type, but if you're playing a tribal deck, if you're playing a fast tribal deck that, you want to, you make a wide board and then you start making it bigger, could potentially be pretty powerful. So, I mean, Glorious Anthem doesn't see play. It's a little bit more complicated to cast. It's just 1 more mana, and it's 1 more white mana, so it makes it a little bit more complicated to cast. You can only play it in white decks. This you could play in, a different, as long as you have white in your deck, you can play this. And if you're playing tribal, it's obviously very good. So if Glorious Anthem doesn't see a lot of play, this could see some because it's cheaper and less complicated to cast, and it's better, it's good for tribal decks, but, and tribal seems to be obviously being pushed, so maybe it sees play in tribal decks, but if Glorious Anthem doesn't see a lot of play at all, then I don't know how much that sees play. Next card I'm just bringing up because I think it's indicative of a future secret lair. Draugr Necromancer. 4 mana, 3 and a black, zombie cleric, snow creature. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. You may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponents own with ice counters on them, and you may spend mana from snow sources as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. And he's a 4/4. I think that this is the Night King for a Game of Thrones secret lair that might be upcoming. It just screams the Night King, like reanimating stuff that your opponents control, blah, blah, blah. It's a zombie cleric, brings stuff back to life. If there is a Game of Thrones secret lair, this is a shoo-in for the Night King. So that's really the only reason I wanted to bring this up. Other than that, it's a 4 mana 4/4, and it doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield, which we know is just bad. You need to be playing things that generate value for you immediately, otherwise they just get removed or they don't really do anything and essentially make you take a turn off. But I mean, his ability is pretty good, but it requires you to remove threats from your opponent, so you have to play this and have removal spells. So it's difficult to see this being very good. I mean, I think maybe if you're unprepared for it and your opponent just is like, removal tribal, maybe that's a thing. But next is Turgrid, God of Fright, a 5 mana, 3 and 2 black legendary god creature with menace. She's a 4/5. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Good against sacrifice decks. And if you're playing discard, you can force your opponent to discard stuff that you want and get it on the battlefield. So I don't think she's terrible. Maybe she has synergy with the Draugr Necromancer. I don't know. Anyway, so she has another dual-faced. She's another dual-faced god. On her other side is Turgrids Lantern. It's a 4 mana, 3 and a black legendary artifact. Tap it. Target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice an online permanent or discard a card. And then for 4 mana, 3 and a black, untap Turgrids Lantern. It's actually pretty good. I like that card a lot. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think she's good. And, maybe the Draugr Necromancer is better than I think. A 5 mana 4/5 with menace. And then whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card. I mean, I love the discards a permanent card thing because of things like duress. You can nab plane. I mean, imagine nabbing an Ugin with a duress, 1 mana duress, and you get an Ugin onto the battlefield under your control. So maybe there's like a mono black discard deck that actually has pretty decent effects, like with Liliana, duress, Tegrid. Who knows? Next card is Asika's Chariot, which is not another dual face card. Asika's Chariot is just a 4 mana 4/4, 3 and a green 4/4 legendary artifact vehicle. When Asika's Chariot enters the battlefield, create 2/2/2 green cat creature tokens. Whenever Asika's Chariot attacks, create a token that's a copy of a target token you control, and you crew it for 4. So it's a vehicle that creates its crew, which is I think is pretty good. I like this card a lot. It's a vehicle that creates its crew, and then generates more crew when it attacks. So I like it. Um, attacking with a 4/4 for 4, though, I mean, things like Lovestruck Beast exist. So if Lovestruck Beast exists and is already ahead, you can't even attack with this and create more tokens. So as much as I like it, it gets shut down by a lot, but I think in the right matchups could be very powerful. But you can't really plan for a card to be good based on a few matchups, especially with Lovestruck Beast being one of the more played cards in Standard. Blood on the Snow is the next card we'll go over. It's 6 mana, 4 and 2 black. Choose one. Destroy all creatures or destroy all planeswalkers. Then return a creature or planeswalker card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast this spell. This is like a pretty good card. If you're playing control, like, you already have things like Shadow's Verdict. Shadow's Verdict is a 5 mana, destroy all converted mana cost 3 or less creatures. So if you have like a 6 mana, 6 mana sorcery to destroy all creatures is good. But I mean, I think what really sets this apart from just being a shitty board wipe or an expensive board wipe is the fact that you can get something back based on the amount of snow spent to cast it. So you wipe the board, and then based on how much snow you spent, you can get something back to the battlefield, not to your hand or anything like that. It's just right back to the battlefield from the graveyard, which is good. And also a thing to consider here is it's destroy all creatures and then return a creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can kill your own creatures, and specifically, I mean, up to a 4 mana, right? Or even up to, I mean, can there be blacks? Like, can you pay black as snow, like a snow source? Like, yeah, you could, right? Because they're snow basics. So you can, up to a 6 mana creature from your graveyard. If you killed it with this spell, you can get it back from your graveyard. Or, if it was already in your graveyard. So I don't think it's bad. I think it's pretty good. Next is Divine Gambit, which is 2 white mana. Exile target artifact, creature, or an enchantment opponent controls. That player may put a permanent card from their hand onto the battlefield. That is so fucking bad. White just getting cucked in 2021, let me tell you. Moving on. Crush the Weak, 3 mana, 2 and a red. Sorcery. Crush the Weak deals 2 damage to each creature. If a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. Has a foretell cost of 1 red mana. I think that's pretty good. I think that's a really good sideboard option, especially if you're playing like decks that play very small creatures and stuff like that. Maybe decks that play small creatures with graveyard synergies. Potentially really good for Historic if you're playing like those very low to the ground, low toughness, like recursion creatures. Like those mono black aggro decks that just rely on like Scrap Heap Scrounger and Gutter Bones and Dread Grave Walker. I forget the other one that's basically Gutter Bones 2.0. Knight of the Ebon Legion, stuff like that. Potentially could be very good against those. It's 3 mana though, so their Knight of the Ebon Legion potentially get Grew or something like that. But good against Sacrifice. You get rid of priests. You get rid of cats, assuming they don't have an oven on the field or something like that. But I think it's pretty good. And I mean, you can pay the foretell cost on turn 2, and then on turn 3, you have it for 1 mana, and then you can have some sort of follow-up. I don't think it's bad. I think it's pretty good. So that was Crush the Weak. Next is a Null. A Null is a 1 mana instant, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. I think this is it's really good, and I think it sees play in sideboards. Obviously with things like the Great Henge, Embercleave, Witch's Oven in Historic, and Witch's Oven even in Standard with Mono Green Food. Witch's Oven, Great Henge, Embercleave, and there's so many other artifacts and enchantments that this would be effective against. There are other ways to remove those that might be better, but I think that it sees a lot of play in sideboards. If you're in the Yorion matchup, in the Yorion mirror, I mean, this is pretty good. Like, would you rather spend a shit ton of would you rather have a complicated white casting cost spell in Heliod's Intervention to destroy a bunch of artifacts and enchantments at instant speed, or would you rather just have a 1 mana, just, you know, they cast something, nope. Like, this is good against Maze Mind Tome. This is good against anything that's higher than 1 mana, artifact or enchantment. Omen of the Sea, at flash speed. You know, anything that they're trying to resolve, I think this is really good. So I think that's like an easy, potentially 4 of in a lot of sideboards. Next card is Feed the Serpent. 4 mana, 2 and 2 black instant, exile target creature or planeswalker, and it's a common. I don't know how this is a common, because this is really fucking good. 4 mana, exiling target creature or planeswalker. I mean, like, if your opponent spent, and it's an instant. So, like, if you have 4 mana up and they play Ugin, buy Ugin for 4 mana. Problem presents itself, goodbye. Exiling target creatures, I mean, like, I don't, like, I think there are cards that are played in Historic that are exactly this. It's like, here, I'll look it up. It's like, Farika's something, or something's Anguish. And it's like, exile, target creature, planeswalker. It's like, oh, I found it. It's not Anguish. Vraska's Contempt. 4 mana, exile target creature, planeswalker, you gain 2 life, and it's a rare. So yeah, you don't get to gain 2 life, but a card that's rare in Historic is a common in Standard now, and I guess Historic. The only thing it doesn't do is you gain 2 life. So Vraska's Contempt is strictly better for Historic, but essentially Standard is getting a Vraska's Contempt, and that card is played in Historic. So, like, I think at the very least, this sees play in sideboards, and the fact that it's a common just blows my fucking mind. I think it's really good, and I think it sees play. I mean, it's expensive, but, like, think of the applications. If you know you're up against certain things, you just hold up the mana for the Ugin. You hold up the mana for, you know, potentially planeswalkers could become more of a problem. They're not super played in Standard right now, but, you know, could be moving forward. But, I mean, a resolved Vivian, goodbye. A resolved Garruk, if you see those recently. But, I mean, it's 4 mana to answer a 4 mana spell. But I still think that card's very good. And there's a lot that you're going to be able to spend that on. One of the examples of something you might want to exile with that card is Cosmo Serpent. It is a 6 mana, 3, a green, a blue, legendary serpent creature. This spell can't be countered. Yikes. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Koma's Coil. Sacrifice another serpent and choose one. Tap target permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated this turn, or Cosmo Serpent gains indestructible until end of turn. And it is a 6/6. Wow. Simic got something finally worth playing, right? Like, in his, like, you have Uro in Historic, and just, like, green has all the best, like, absolutely the best creatures, and, like, some of the best stuff you can be doing with Great Henge, and now you're just giving green and blue just absolute gas. This card is so fucking good. Wow. I mean, it is a enters the battlefield and does nothing, so maybe it's not as good as I think, but man, oh man, if this thing survives, I mean, that's, even if this thing survives a turn, you get a 3/3 and then it's indestructible. Or you tap a target permanent and like, oh man, it's a good card. It's a good card. It's expensive and it has a complicated casting cost, but it's a good card. Would be very, very shitty to play against that and not be able to remove it the turn it comes down. Carter, Doomscar Krieger. That's my cat's name. Not Carter Doomscar Krieger. It's just Krieger, but maybe it's maybe Krieger short. Okay, anyway, 4 mana, 2 a black and a red. Legendary Berserker creature, and oh my god, this is in a language I didn't realize that this wasn't in English. Let me find the card so I can translate for you real quick. There should be a translation out here. Okay, there is. Legendary Demon Berserker creature. When Carter Doomscourge enters the battlefield until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. So good for Commander. Whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So a very good Commander card. I think it's just sick art. I'll probably buy it because it has my cat's name in it. Next is Carter's Vicious Return. Another 4 mana, 2, a black and a red. Enchantment Saga with 3 chapters. First chapter, you may sacrifice a creature. When you do, Carter's Vicious Return deals 3 damage to any target. Chapter 2, each player discards a card. Chapter 3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until your next turn. That's actually pretty good. You sacrifice a creature knowing you'll get it back by turn, like the 3rd chapter of this thing, and it gets a +1/+1 counter on it, and it has haste when it comes back. And it deals 3 damage when it dies. You can sacrifice, you could sacrifice something shitty and get it back with a +1/+1 counter on it. I don't think it's terrible for 4 mana. Maybe it's not the best thing in the world. I like it. I like that sacrifice is getting more stuff, because I want to see sacrifice do stuff. Next is Waking the Trolls. 6 mana, 4, a red and a green. Enchantment Saga. 3 chapters again. Destroy target land is chapter 1. Chapter 2, put target land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Chapter 3, choose target opponent. If they control fewer lands than you, you create a number of 4/4 green troll warrior creature tokens with trample equal to the difference. Huh. I mean, if your opponent, I don't know. Land destruction, though. Land destruction had its day, for a week. Maybe, I don't know. Was it before rotation? Yeah, it was way before rotation. When was land destruction a thing? It's when Agent of Treachery was, stealing lands, and land destruction became a thing, so... I don't know. Maybe land destruction becomes more of a thing. Next is Vega the Watcher. 3 mana, 1, a white, and a blue. Legendary bird spirit creature with flying. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. And it's a 2/2. So this works really well with adventures. But what adventure creature... maybe, because, Azorius. I'm trying to think of Azorius adventures. And Brazen Borrower is fantastic. Giant Killer's pretty good. So maybe some sort of, control shell likes this. I don't know. But Adventures works really well. And Foretell, I suppose, works really well too, right? Because Foretell, you take the card out of your hand and you cast its Foretell cost later in the game, so it's not being cast from your hand. So, both Adventures and Foretell, this could be very good with Adventures, some sort of Adventures and Foretell, or maybe a Foretell/Adventures deck. So I like Vega. I think Vega could potentially be very good. He makes 2 mechanics that are already good better. Which is a sign of a good card. The Tricksters God Heist is a 4 mana, 2, a blue, and a black Enchantment Saga with 3 chapters. First chapter, you may exchange control of 2 target creatures. Chapter 2, you may exchange control of 2 target non-basic, non-creature permanents that share a card type. And then Chapter 3, target player loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. There's nothing more in this world that I hate more than yoink effects in Magic the Gathering. I hate Act of Treason. I hate a Crowan War. I hate Low Mage's Domination. I hate Mass Manipulation. I hated Agent of Treachery. I think it's just I get that it's part of the interaction or whatever, but I don't know, to invest mana and time into building up some sort of board presence or building up something and then just have your opponent be like, yeah, no, it's mine now. It's just the fucking worst. So seeing more of stuff like that, and this is a lot. This is exchange control of up to 2 target creatures. And then you exchange control of 2 target non-basic, non-creature permanents that share a card type. And then target player loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. I don't know, man. Your Dimir control opponent has some or your Esper Yorion opponent has the 2 tokens from Omen of the Sea, and you've built up some sick board with some creatures and they haven't countered them or anything, and then they just play this, and then you get 2 tokens, and then and they get everything that you built. And then the game's potentially just over. Fuck that and fuck this card. I hate it. Thanks, I hate it. Next is Goldspan Dragon, which I think is a very good card. I've been seeing a lot of buzz about it. 5 mana, 3 and 2 red, dragon creature, 4/4 with flying and haste. Whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasures you control have tapped, sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. I think it's really good. Ramps you well. It's an immediate threat that needs to be answered. If it doesn't get answered, you create a treasure token, and then your treasure tokens help like mega ramp you. I think it's a very good card. And then lastly is Tyvar Kell. We finally got the Planeswalker information on Tyvar. In my previous video, we just knew that he was going to be a Planeswalker. We didn't actually have the card itself presented or spoiled yet. So here is the Tyvar Kell Planeswalker card. 4 mana, 2 and 2 green. Elves you control have tapped to add 1 black mana. Interesting. So this is going to be played in Golgari. He has a +1 ability. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target elf. Untap it. It gains Death Touch until end of turn. For 0 mana, create a 1/1 elf warrior creature token. And then for -6, you get an emblem with whenever you cast an elf spell, it gains haste until end of turn, and you draw 2 cards. He starts with 3 loyalty. I like it a lot. I mean, I don't think it's particularly like a mover or a shaker in the meta, especially in Standard. I don't think Standard has, at least from what we've seen, Standard does not really have a playable Elves deck. Unless they come out with like some cheaper, better Elves. Standard, at the very least, needs cheaper, lower mana cost Elves to cast. And then maybe it's playable. I mean, they have an Elf Lord, but he's 4 mana. This card helps Elves and stuff like that. But like the elf deck in Historic, maybe there is a pretty good Golgari elf deck in Historic. I mean, a 0 mana ability to defend yourself as a Planeswalker is pretty good. Starting with 3 loyalty is kind of rough. But his +1, like if you already have a board presence, his +1 is pretty effective. I mean, it helps defend him. His 0 helps defend him. So he has 2 abilities that help protect him, which is pretty fucking good. And his -6 is pretty lit. I'm sorry, it's pretty great. I'm trying to not say lit. I feel like I'm 16. It's very good. His -6 is good. Anytime you cast an elf, it gains haste until end of turn, and you draw 2 cards. I think the elf deck in Historic doesn't really need card draw. But if you can get that off with that deck, I mean, it's probably already game anyway. But I like it a lot. Does it replace anything in the current Elves deck in Historic? Maybe not. Maybe can you make like a cool Golgari Elves deck? Maybe. In Standard, I don't know that there's an Elves deck per se yet. But maybe as more stuff gets spoiled, we see some, maybe lower mana cost Elves or maybe more impactful Elves that makes it worth playing. All right, everybody, that does it for the cards that I thought were notable that have been spoiled so far. Again, I'm going to be putting a link in the description to mythicspoiler.com. If you want to check out all the cards that are spoiled so far, or at least, a majority of them, they'll be on that website. As time goes on, I'll pick and choose more cards. It's been a couple days, so this is going to be a pretty lengthy video with a lot of the cards spoiled. But, I'll try to check in daily and see if there are any cards that are notable so I can put out, shorter videos for you and maybe have a little bit more lengthy discussions about each card. Or if you guys just like the short videos, I just tell you what the card is, show you the card, and then maybe say a sentence or two about it. If you like that format, we can do that too. And maybe I can do, I can parse out the videos more. I can do like 4 days between them, just get a bunch of cards, show you the cards, and say a sentence or two about them, and that's it. But yeah, that's the video for today. So thanks everybody for watching. And yeah, looking forward to more Kaldheim spoilers. Getting really, really excited about this set. And it should be coming out pretty soon, I think in the next like week or two. So getting excited. Good luck out there, everybody.